Welcome to Unit 5, Day 8 Notes. Today's objective is to complete a two-way frequency table. Before doing anything, let's go ahead and review what do the words frequency, frequency distribution, and two-way frequency table mean. The first term, frequency, is strictly the number of times a data point appears. Just as a scatter plot shows the relationship between two sets of data, the frequency distribution shows the frequencies of data. It's like a bar graph or a circle graph. It just shows the number of frequencies. The difference with a two-way frequency table is that the two-way table shows the frequencies for two variables, by row totals and by column totals. Today's objective will work first with a frequency distribution of just one variable, and we'll move towards a two-way table. Looking at example A, it says Lake Zurich's Sports Spot recorded the number of tents sold each week in March and uses this data to make a frequency table. And so you'll see there are 4 weeks in the table. There are tallies to show the number of tents sold. And then the frequency column is what we're going to fill in, which strictly looks at the number of tents sold. So if you count up the tally marks, there are 5 tally marks in the first week. There are 12 tally marks in the second week. There are 7 tally marks in the third week, and in the fourth week there are 10, giving us a total of 5, 12, 7, and 10, 34 tents sold. Looking at the question below the table, it asks what percentage of all tents sold in March were sold during the first 2 weeks of the month. And so strategy, we need to figure out the number of tents that were sold in the first 2 weeks, and then compare that part to the total number of tents that were sold to figure out our percentage. And so looking at the number of tents sold in week 1, we have 5. Looking at the table for the number of tents sold in week 2, there's 12, which gives us a total in those 2 weeks of 17. To find the percentage, we need to compare that 17 to the total 34 tents that were sold in March. If you recognize, we can divide both the numerator and denominator by 17, which gives us a half. And then if you recall, percents have a denominator of 100. And so if we wanted to get that equivalent fraction, 2 times 50 would equal 100. 1 times 50 equals 50. And so the number of tents, or percentage of tents that were sold in the first 2 weeks turns out to be 50% of the total tents sold. The other example to complete is a two-way table with missing values. And so this is kind of like a puzzle. You need to be sure that the rows add up left to right and the columns add up top to bottom. And then the total should reflect both the column totals added up and then the row totals added up. And so looking at the table that's provided for you, asking males and females if they believe in Martians, yes or no, and looking at the values, you could start in a couple different places. If the columns need to add up top to bottom, then 10 plus what number equals 48, and that would be 38. We could have also looked to begin at 48 being the total number of yes, and what total number of no add up to 100, and that's 52. And so now from either of these places, we can continue to fill out values. For example, we can say the people who said no needs to add to 52, and if we already have 20, then that's going to be 32 people. We could also look across again and see 38 and 20 equals what total, and that would be 58. And then last but not least, we could look at the row across for males, or we could look at the total column, and either way come to the conclusion that the total number of males surveyed is 42. And then you could check and make sure that the 48 and the 52 equals 100, which it does, and then the 42 and the 58 equals 100, which it does. Go ahead and turn the sheet over. We're going to do a basic review of fractions and percents to be sure that you can do some mental math adequately. Let's be sure you feel comfortable with percents and fractions. If you take a look at the left-hand side of the worksheet, it asks you to write each percent as a fraction in lowest terms. And if you recall, percents are written as fractions out of 100. And so 20% is a 20 out of 100. And then recognizing the greatest common factor, 20 goes into 20 and into 100. And so the fraction in lowest terms is 1/5. Looking at the next one down, if we have 15 out of 100, the greatest common factor of 15 and 100 is 5. And simplifying both the numerator and denominator by that term, we get the equivalent fraction 3/20. That can't be simplified anymore. And just one more, if we look at 25 out of 100, we can divide both 100 and 25 by 25 and get a quarter. If you take a look at the other side of the worksheet, it asks you to write each fraction as a percent, and so we're reversing the process. We're trying to figure out what over 100 is equivalent to the given fraction. And so if we want to write the equivalent fraction, we'd have to multiply 5 by 20 to get 100. And so we'll do the same to the numerator and get 40 out of 100, which is equivalent to 40%. Taking a look at the next one, if we have 9 out of 10, we'd have to multiply 10 by 10, and therefore 9 by 10 to get an equivalent fraction out of 100. 90 out of 100 is a 90%. And let's take a look at one more. We have 3 over 25. 25 times 4 is 100. 3 times 4 is 12, and so 12 out of 100 is a 12%. At this time, you should show your notes to the substitute, and she'll hand you the worksheet. You do not have to finish this side of the notes. If there's extra time, I will ask that you go back and go ahead and finish the conversions.